To make this, I attached elastic bands to a tarp on the inside of the trash can and sealed it up with duct tape. When I release the tarp, it creates an overpressure which pushes air out of a hole that I have cut in the bottom of the trash can. The spinning air also moves forward remarkably far in a vortex. Fog is used to demonstrate movement of the vortex. Check this out in slow motion.
Is it possible that alien life could be so different and strange from life as we know it here on Earth that we would just completely miss it even if we encountered it? Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I would venture to say that that is the most likely scenario at this point, because as you've heard me mention in past videos, our current ability to recognize forms of life that differ substantially from life as we know it, either in their chemical makeup or their general organization, is pretty much non-existent. And that's mostly because we only have one example of life to make inferences from. And just to illustrate the problem, the majority of past, present, and future missions, with few exceptions, that have some astrobiological component, meaning that at least part of their objectives is to find evidence of past or present life on another world, have mostly relied on the detection of organic molecules using instruments like mass spectrometers. And the way we interpret those data is with our bias, right? So we're looking for molecules that life uses here on Earth. But imagine if a hypothetical life form used completely different chemistry. What if its chemistry was based on different elements, like we've discussed in some of my other videos, things like silicon or boron? Or even if it used carbon, maybe it uses completely different kinds of biomolecules. Maybe it doesn't use DNA, RNA, or protein. And if that's the case, those detection methods would completely fail us. So there is a big push in astrobiology to try to agnosticize our detection methods, meaning that we're trying to find ways of detecting life based on what it does rather than what it's made of. And the thinking is that that will give us a better shot at detecting these weird forms of life that we would otherwise miss if we were using things that, like mass spectrometry, where we are inherently biasing it towards forms of life as we know it.
Deaf people of Reddit, what was the most underwhelming sound, respective to your expectations? Some dude in an old thread was surprised clouds colliding didn't make noise. When I first got hearing aids at age 6, I was riding in the car home and first noticed the sound of the car. Then I started rubbing my jacket, and realized that my hand rubbing on material made a sound too. My mom turns around and says, "Stop that, why are you rubbing your jacket so much?" Responded simply, "I can hear it." She instantly started crying. My friend said grocery cart wheels making a sound was both surprising and irritating. When my uncle got cochlear implants, he spent the whole next day wondering what this constant, obnoxious, ugly noise was. After hours of searching, found out it was the clock ticking. He questioned why the hell it needs to make noise. I suppose without having it tuned out, it would be pretty annoying. On a happier note, when he first got them in, he cried with happiness when he realized his brother sounded different than the nurse.
So we're putting on our Frankestein molds by Fruit Molds. I've got a little bit of dirt on there from the last one. What I like to do is find a pumpkin that's about the size of a softball, maybe to a baseball, right in that area. If they get too big, then they don't slide down in on the sides here. Then you just put it like that, that's the bottom, right underneath it. And you put the top on like that. And then through each hole, you just slide a bolt and then put a nut on it and bolt that up. And then when I'm done, I like to turn them at a 45 like that. That way air goes in through the nose and the chin, and there's a couple holes in the back, and you can create some airflow. Now if it gets real hot, over 85 to 88 degrees, you get up into the 90s, throw a blanket over so that the sun doesn't cook it. But they take 5 to 7 days to fill out. Sometimes they don't fill out all the way. That one's on 45, you can see. That one's on his back, his chin's not quite filled out. You can gently turn those a little bit, but the end result, you end up getting molds that, when we pop them out, they look just like Frankestein. They look pretty cool.
If you look closely on airplanes and boats, you might have noticed these red and green lights on each side, and once again, there's no coincidence, it's a life-saving design decision. Back in the day, there were a lot of boat collisions at nighttime, so in 1838, the US made it legally required for boats to have navigation lights. Red on the left, green on the right, and white on top and the back. Later on, there were similar requirements for airplanes. This allows for other boats to be able to tell the direction of the vessel just by looking at the lights. For example, if you only see white and green or white and red, that means the vessel's going sideways. If you see all three of them at the same time, that means it's coming towards you. And if you only see the white, that means it's going away. Navigation lights are also used in helicopters and even satellites.
Do you think that you have any influence or impact? Like, I don't care who you are. Kylie Jenner could be watching this and I'm like, bitch, get in line. Not behind me, behind Genghis Khan. And I know you're thinking like, oh yeah, because his gene pool is like huge. I mean, sure, but that's not really the craziest thing he did. He literally killed so many people, he changed the temperature of the planet. He changed the temperature of the planet via murder. He literally killed so many people, the earth actively started to cool. So what the fuck have you done today? I mean, who? No. His murderous invasion actually helped scrub about 700 million tons of carbon from the atmosphere. I'm just at the tip of the iceberg on this. If you want to learn more about it, just look up the greenest invader. I think that's what they were calling the study. If not, that's what a lot of people are referring to it as, because that's what I keep seeing it referenced as. So yeah, knock yourself out. But that shit is insane, objectively.
I'm obsessed with names, and I think one of the coolest things to look at is one original name and see all the variations it's spawned over time. Basically, you start with one name and then it's shortened, it's changed, and that shortening is changed, and it's relengthened, and all of these different things happen, and it's so cool to look at the evolution. This is especially prevalent with biblical names because they're circulated worldwide and they tend to be popular for a long time, but let's do an example. The name is Elisheva. You might not have heard of it. It's from the Old Testament. Except you definitely have, because in English it's Elizabeth, or Elisabetta, or Elsbeth. Oh yeah, also Isabel and Isabella. Maybe you're more of a fan of a shortened form of Elizabeth. From the beginning of the name, we have Eliza, Elsa, Ellie, Ella, Isa, Izzy, Lisa. From the middle of the name, we get Babette and Libby. And from the back half of the name, Bella, Betty, Bess, Beth, Betsy, even Buffy. And all of those names come from one name, Elisheva, and there's so many other examples of names like this.
I have two identical pieces of paper here. If I place one on top of the other, then for every point in the top sheet of paper, there's a corresponding point in the bottom sheet of paper. If then I take the top sheet and flip it over, are there still any points that are directly above the point in the bottom sheet that they correspond to? Of course there are, the points along the line that I flipped over. What if I put the top sheet back in its original position and then rotate by 180 degrees? There's still a point which is directly above its corresponding point in the bottom sheet, the one right in the middle that I rotated around. Well, what if I take the top sheet of paper and crumple it up? Is there now a point in the top sheet which is directly above its corresponding point in the bottom sheet? Can we guarantee that? Surprisingly, the answer is yes. As long as I don't rip the top sheet of paper and it sits directly above the bottom sheet, then the Brouwer fixed point theorem guarantees there's some point in the top sheet of paper that's directly above its corresponding point in the bottom sheet.
I waste all my time when I'm wasted.
One second, I gotta close my door. I had a man, right, who admitted how often he cheated on his wife and how often he hit his wife. So I said, I'm like, it's okay to let some things die with you, right? I've had a woman who, she lived out in the country, and she was married 3 times. And each one of her husbands died. The first one was from like a stomach infection. The second one had a hunting accident. And the third one had a car accident. And she admitted that she actually murdered all of them. We had another one where, and I actually saw it in your comments, but I've heard this, a woman's first husband was incredibly abusive. And she actually gave me this advice. She's like, if you ever marry an abusive man, honey, you need to get a horse. And you need to make sure that your husband learns to ride the horse. Because horses are great covers for head injuries. What else? I had a woman who said her best friend came to her and said, my husband's abusive. And she's like, don't worry, we got it. And they shot him in the back of the head, dismembered him, and then threw his body parts into different parts of the Mississippi River. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that's just a normal Tuesday for us to hear this stuff.
If you take two sheets of polarized film and hold them perpendicular to each other, they'll block out almost all the light. But if you put something between them and that changes the polarity of the light, you can see those changes. We're going to use this to observe the muscles inside of mosquito larvae. So check this out. As the muscles change orientation on the slide by contracting, they also change color. This is because muscle tissue changes the polarity of the light as it passes through. That allows different wavelengths of light to pass through the second filter. This whole series of manipulating the orientation of light allows us to see these mandible muscles in clear detail.
This is a pantograph. It's a 4-bar linkage made up of 2 long and 2 short bars that are connected at pivot points. The linkage is pinned at point A, and because of how the bars are connected together, any movement at point B will be reproduced at point C. The movement at point C can be the same size, a scaled up or scaled down version of the movement at point B. Pantographs were used in the 17th century to copy maps and drawings, and even to forge signatures.
Here's a design secret about Pringles potato chips, whose iconic shape is not arbitrary, but actually designed by supercomputers running advanced aerodynamic simulations. Back in the day, Pringles had a manufacturing problem. The production line was moving so fast to meet the high demand that chips were literally flying off of the conveyor belts due to wind resistance. So Pringles enlisted the help of supercomputers to come up with an aerodynamic shape for the potato chips known as a hyperbolic paraboloid, so the chips don't fly off of the production line. The new design was a success, but it turned out there was other benefits as well. It made the chips easier to stack, it reduced the chance of them breaking during transport, and it made it so there's no predictable way for the chips to break in your mouth, giving it that oddly satisfying crunch.